Hi, GDR here in beautiful Jamaica on a beautiful night. I'm with special writing guest, Shantaram, the man with the most grammar. As we get into this, we want to talk about story and plot. This is for the second of these podcasts on getting started in writing. What do you do when you first want to become a writer? What's the first kind of thing that you do, establishing yourself? And we talked about all those first early steps you're going to take in the first podcast. We're now talking about the distinction between and the connection between story and plot. So just to put this in context before I throw to Scantana, here's story and here's plot as outlined by one of my favorite critics, John Wayne, W-A-I-N, who wrote many decades ago. He wrote, "This is story. The king died. Full stop. 6 months later, the queen died. Full stop. That's story." It's almost like a telegram from a reporter at the front line. Here's plot. The king died, and 6 months later, the queen died of grief. This is plot. What's the difference? Motivation has been added in. Some kind of connection that explains why, how, a why that we didn't even think was necessary in the first two sets of facts. But when the why is added in there, that motivation, that factor. So, in short, story answers the questions, and what happened next? And what happened next? And what happened next? Story will keep you going, it's that engine. Plot is, why did that happen? Why did that character do that? Or why did this happen? What's the significance of this? The plot thickens, meaning the story is accelerating. It doesn't mean, gee, there are more events. When the plot thickens, it doesn't mean there are more events happening. It means they're starting to get interconnected in a way that makes sense to you, and so on. So when you're working out poetry, and you have narrative, you have a story that you're going to tell, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and so on. Can you talk to me about story and plot when it comes to poetry?
All right. Well, for me personally, as you said, I like that analogy by John Wayne. The king died, the end. The queen dies, the end. And then for plot, whereas the king dies, and then the queen dies of grief. For me, it's a thing where story is straight on. So it's a tale that walks its way to a climax, and then it concludes. Whereas in plot, it's a series of climaxes.
Yes.
It's a series of climaxes because of the suspense. And just when you think it's over, oh, here's another story. Just when you think it's over, here's another story.
Yeah.
So I approach writing poetry with that same formula. If I'm just doing like a straight-on poem, the figurative language could be metaphoric. I use metaphoric language. However, there wouldn't be a concept to it.
Yes.
In poetry, plots would be concepts.
Indeed.
So you conceptualize an idea. For instance, I am a letter. What letter am I? Now, by me saying that I am a letter, what letter am I? The mind of my listener is probably thinking the alphabet. Oh, he's the letter P. He's the letter X. When I'm actually a full-on love letter. There's plot.
Excellent.
You understand what I'm saying?
Fantastic.
But if its story is, I am the letter S.
Excellent.
And this is my function. This is where I reside in
Fantastic.
the alphabet.
I love that. Can you talk about, you were talking the other day about the use of the word the fall. And there's like the fall from grace, and there is the fall, the physical fall you're going to take, and so on.
Right.
How you build that in, and then you've got the autumn, which is the fall, and then you've got a birthday.
Right.
Without like giving too much away from that, because it is a poem. Can you explain that a bit so that people can get that, how that's built in, the layers of it?
Well, what I do is you have in poetry, we have what are called schemes. So a scheme is basically a plot. Is like I said, it's a series of climaxes. So you look at a word, not for what it is, but for all of the possibilities of what it can be. So for instance, like you said with the fall, I'm trying to actually remember exactly what poem, because I would have just shared the line, but there's so many of them. Sometimes it's jumbled.
I'll
But
see you next fall.
I'll
Am
see
I
you
right?
next. But that's it. So in that specific poem, which is a conversation with
Yes.
God, at the end of the poem, where I say to God, treating me wrong. Now God says to me, now you have the nerve to tell me that I'm treating you wrong. And then I says, I guess you got a point. And God says back to me, I'll see you next fall. Now next fall can be a series of things. It could be the autumn, and it can be the next time I fall into a situation where I call on God.
Yes.
So in the start of the next verse, where I said on the date of 9:30 at 5:30 p.m. taking a ride to Jersey in a white pearly BM. Tipsy, my mind blurry. I'm in sort of a hurry to scoop Tijuana for a flight, headed to Georgia for the night. And then it goes on to tell you where
You got that
the
right.
BMW
You got that, guy.
crashes and the car flips and
The fall.
there. That's my next fall.
Yeah.
So this fall that I took where the crash happened on September 30th.
Exactly.
Which is
in
night.
the fall. I
You
know.
know what I mean?
So
that's
that's the kind
plot.
of thing. Yes.
That's plot.
And that's the kind of thing that when a writer explains it to you, and it's a line that you just read, and even as an astute reader, you might, and writer yourself, you might pick up one or two. You might pick up Fall from Grace, whatever. But when the writer explains that to you, it unpacks it, and so on, there's so much joy in it. So think about that yourself as writers. What you're packing in there for other people to unpack. It may be only one person in 10,000, or they get the opportunity to hear you explain how you unpack it for someone. But it's worth doing that. Take the time, take the trouble, build it in, pack it around, because when the reader unfolds that and they get that, it's a jewel. And you made that.
And a great way to also do so, I like to share with aspiring writers, is an avid reader makes an excellent writer, because you learn different writing styles. Never take for granted that every writer writes the same. Like we can both be two writers of plots, but my approach to writing plot is different. I can use several double entendres and triple entendres, where you're using more so similes.
Yes.
It's kind of straight on, but there's still figurative writing in there. So when you're embarking on writing, read everything. Read every author, because every author has something to offer you within their writing style.
Yes.
And that's how I develop my writing style.
Totally. And you look at the difference between, such a good point, you look at the difference between, say, Agatha Christie, which is a completely plot-driven.
Plot-driven.
It's all about plot, and it's all about who did it and why. Who done it is the whole thing. So you check that out, you see that kind of writing style quite often because it's plot-dependent. The characters themselves are really ciphers. There's one or two who are very well drawn, and the rest are really ciphers. So what happens if you're plot-driven is that you box yourself into a corner. And Agatha Christie did this because in each case, Poirot would always come up with an answer for this, or Miss Marple, based on something they found that we as readers weren't privy to. We didn't know. And it'll be, well, while you were over so-and-so, I opened this drawer and found this letter, and that's what led me on this. Oh, well, excuse me, if you told us, we would have worked it out too, if you know what I mean.
Right.
That's, in other words, you get tricks. Then you get, along that path, then you get a plot writer like Chuck Palahniuk with a weird, amazing book like Fight Club, and you are the plot. The revelation at the end of that book is that you are the plot. It's so clever that your perception of what's going on is the plot that's unfolding before your very eyes.
Right.
So, and get into it. Read every writer you can. Virginia Woolf, another tremendous writer of plot, because she was so clever at putting plot into her stories that you have to dig to find it. It's how clever she was. And so on. Thomas Hardy, another writer, a tremendous writer of plot. Who else would you recommend?
You have writers like James Patterson is an excellent writer of plot and suspense. In my earlier days of reading, there was writers like John Grisham. John Grisham is an excellent writer of plot.
Definitely.
He's
you want to learn?
Excellent writer of plot. Sidney Sheldon is also another one. For story, you know, you have writers like Toni Morrison. She's excellent.
Exactly.
Yeah, Toni Morrison is an excellent writer. You have a guy, James Cannell, James S. Cannell. He wrote a book called King Khan. This book, the writing style in this book is amazing. It's about a
Check
guy
that out.
called Beano Bates. And Beano Bates comes from a family of con artists. And they're like a massive network right across the United States. Everyone in the family has super connections. But the way he ties his characters in to things, to certain events that happened back then, and then they come and he's an amazing writer. He's an amazing writer.
Excellent. And read across every discipline too, I think. You know, read philosophy, you get your hands on it and you think it's readable, you like it, have a look at it. Read poetry. Read essays. Read things outside of where you think you want to be a fiction writer, but good, read other stuff as you go along.
Yeah, because there's even some spiritual books that you can read that can teach you writing styles.
Yes.
Ayanna Van Zandt is an excellent example of that. Her writing style is very passionate. For me, she's almost like a Danielle Steele of spirituality.
Yes.
Because she's so passionate in her writing. You can actually feel her words resonating off the page. Ayanna Van Zandt. Shahrazad Ali is another excellent writer.
Excellent. And you just reminded me of someone, and of one of the techniques. We'll close this down pretty soon, but here's one to finish with. When you find yourself with two plots that are happening in the same book, and you weave them together and you go from one to the other, it takes tremendous skill and finesse to do that. If you carry it off in a poem or a story or a rap, and you're talking about this, but at the same time there's a subplot. And this subplot concept in movies is what really enriches cinema. The subplot becomes something that is a constant dialogue with you. Because the movie is there to entertain the world and whatever, but the subplot is there for you. That subplot is directly communicating with you. So if you get a writer like Elif Shafak, for example, in The 40 Rules of Love, I recommend anyone, if you're starting out writing and you want to read a book that is just tremendous, exquisite writing, but that manages to weave two plots together and put these things together and does it seamlessly and engages you throughout. That's a really good example, but wow, you need to reach a certain skill level to pull that off. It's very, very difficult. Stick with one in the beginning, I think. One story, one plot, and see it through to the end.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, I agree, because you can lose yourself in your own story.
You can.
I've done it, so I'm speaking from experience.
So really know yourself, rule yourself, be yourself, don't lose yourself. Thank you very much to my special writer guest, Shantana. Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
Me.
Thank you. All right. God bless and keep everyone there safe.